Chapter 68. Rome. In my mind, Greece lay weeks, not the real hours, behind. The sun shone as certainly. The people were far more elegant, the architecture and the art much richer, but it was as if the Italians, like their Roman ancestors, wore a great mask of luxury, a cosmetic of the overindulged senses, between the light, the truth, and their real selves. I couldn't stand the loss of the beautiful nakedness, the humanity of Greece, and so I couldn't stand the sight of the opulent animal Romans, as one sometimes cannot stand one's own face in a mirror. Early the morning after my arrival, I caught a local train out toward Tivoli and the Alban Hills. After a long bus ride, I had lunch at Subiaco and then walked up a road above a green chasm. A lane branched off into a deserted glen. I could hear the sound of running water far below, the singing of birds. The road came to an end, path led up through a cool grove of ilex, and then tapered out into a narrow flight of steps that twisted up round a wall of rock. The monastery came into sight, clinging like an Orthodox Greek monastery, like a martin's nest, to the cliff. A Gothic loggia looked out prettily over the green ravine, over a little apron of cultivated terraces falling below. Fine frescoes on the inner wall, coolness, silence. There was an old monk in a black habit sitting behind the door through to an inner gallery. I asked if I could see John Leverrier. I said, an Englishman, on a retreat. Luckily, I had his letter ready to show. The old man carefully deciphered the signature. Then, to my surprise, I had decided I was on a wild goose chase, nodded, and silently disappeared down into some lower level of the monastery. I went on into a hall, a series of macabre murals, Death pricking a young falconer with his longsword, a medieval strip cartoon of a girl first titivating herself in front of a glass, then fresh in her coffin, then with the bones beginning to erupt through the skin, then as a skeleton. There was the sound of someone laughing, an old monk with an amused face, scolding a younger one in French, as they passed through the hall behind me. Oh, si tu penses que le football est un digne sujet de méditation. Then another monk appeared, and I knew with shock that this was Leverrier. He was tall, very close-cut hair with a thin-cheeked, round face, and glasses with standard national health frames, unmistakably English. He made a little gesture, asking if it was me who had asked for him. I'm Nicholas Orff, from Phraxos. He managed to look amazed, shy, and annoyed all at the same time. After a long moment's hesitation, he held out his hand. It seemed dry and cold. Mine was stickily hot from the walk. He was a good 4 inches taller than I am, and as many years older, and spoke with a trace of the incisiveness that young dons sometimes affect. You come all this way? It was easy to stop off at Rome. I thought I'd made it clear that, yes, you did, but... We both smiled bleakly at the broken-ended sentences. He looked me in the eyes, affirming decision. I am afraid your visit must still be considered in vain. I honestly had no idea that you were... I waved vaguely at his habit. I thought you signed your letters. Yours in Christ? He smiled thinly. I am afraid that even here we are susceptible to the forces of anti-pretension. He looked down and we stood awkwardly. He came as if impatient with our awkwardness to a kinder decision, some mollification. Well, now you are here, let me show you round. I wanted to say that I hadn't come as a tourist, but he was already leading the way through to an inner courtyard. I was shown the traditional ravens and crows, the holy bramble, which put forth roses when St. Benedict rolled on it. As always on such occasions, the holiness of self-mortification paled in my too literal mind beside the vision of a naked man pounding over the hard earth and taking a long jump into a blackberry bush. And I found the Peregrinos easier to feel reverence for. I discovered absolutely nothing about the summer of 1951, though I discovered a little more about Leverrier. He was at Sacro Specco for only a few weeks, having just finished his novitiate at some monastery in Switzerland. He had been to Cambridge and read history. He spoke fluent Italian. He was rather unjustifiably believed to be an authority on the pre-Reformation monastic orders in England, which was why he was at Sacro Specco, to consult sources in the famous library, and he had not been back to Greece since he left it. He remained very much an English intellectual, rather self-conscious, aware that he must look as if he were playing at being a monk, dressing up and even a little complicatedly vain about it. Finally, he took me down some steps and out into the open air below the monastery. I perfunctorily admired the vegetable and vineyard terraces. He led the way to a wooden seat under a fig tree. A little farther on, we sat. He did not look at me. "This is very unsatisfactory for you, but I warned you. It's a relief to meet a fellow victim, even if he is mute." He stared out across a box-bordered parterre into the blue heat of the sun-baked ravine. I could hear water rushing down in the depths. "A fellow, not a victim. I simply wanted to compare notes." He paused, then said, "The essence of his system is that you learn not to compare notes." He made the phrase sound cheap. His wanting me to go was all but spoken. I stole a look at him. "Would you be here now if—" A lift on the road one has already long been traveling explains when, not why. Our experiences must have varied very widely. Why should they be similar? "Are you a Catholic?" I shook my head. "A Christian, even?" I shook my head again. He shrugged. He had dark shadows under his eyes, as if he was tired. "But I do believe in charity." "My dear man, you don't want charity from me. You want confessions I am not prepared to make. In my view, I am being charitable in not making them. In my position, you would understand." He added, "And at my remove, I trust you will understand." His voice was set cold. There was a silence. He said, "I'm sorry. You force me to be more brusque than I wish. I'd better go." He seized his chance and stood up. "I intend nothing personal, of course. Let me see you to the gate." We walked back into the whitewashed door carved through the rock, up past doors that were like prison cells, and out into the hall with the death murals, the grim mirror of eternity. He said, "I meant to ask you about the school. There was a boy called Afendakis, very promising. I coached him." We lingered a little in the loggia beside the Peregrinos, exchanging sentences about the school. I could see that he was not really interested, was merely making an effort to be pleasant, to humiliate his pride. But even in that he was self-conscious. We shook hands. He said, "This is a great European shrine, and we are told that our visitors, whatever their beliefs, should leave it feeling, I think the words are, refreshed and consoled." He paused as if I might want to object, to sneer, but I said nothing. "I must ask you once again to believe that I am silent for your sake, as well as mine." "I'll try to believe it." He gave a formal sort of bow, more Italian than English, and I went down the rock staircase to the path through the ilexes. I had to wait till evening in Subico for a bus back to the station. It ran through long green valleys, under hilltop villages, past aspens already yellowing into autumn. The sky turned through the softer blues to a vesperal amber pink. Old peasants sat at their doorways. Some of them had Greek faces, inscrutable, noble, at peace. I felt, perhaps because I had drunk a bottle of Verdicchio while I waited, that I belonged and would forever belong to an older world than Leverrier's. I didn't like him or his religion, and this not liking him, this half-drunken love of the ancient, unchanging Greco-Latin world seemed to merge. I was a pagan, at best a stoic, at worst a voluptuary, and would remain forever so. Waiting for the train, I got more drunk. A man at the station bar managed to make me understand that an indigo hilltop under the lemon-green sky to the west was where the poet Horace had had his farm. I drank to the Sabine Hill. Better one Horace than 10 St. Benedicts. Better one poem than 10,000 sermons. Much later I realized that perhaps Leverrier, in this case, would have agreed, because he too had chosen exile, because there are times when silence is a poem. Chapter 68. Rome. In my mind, Greece lay weeks, not the real hours,